Hello and welcome to the 7th episode of Town Talk. I'm your host, Connor Lynch. Town Talk is a program where we sit down with important decision makers and figures in the community in order to learn more about what's going on in Westwood. This episode is a bit timely as we are just a few weeks away from the beginning of town meeting, which will be held on Monday, May 6th at the Westwood High School auditorium. With us today is perhaps the most crucial person in the town meeting process, our town moderator, Jim O'Sullivan. Jim, thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me, Colin.
Yeah. So I remember talking to you a little bit beforehand, and I remember filming your candidate message last year, so I know that this is the first inaugural year that you get to be a town moderator.
That's correct.
How you feeling? Nervous?
Yeah, sure. A little nervous.
Yeah. I'm sure it'll go fine. So I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of who you are and what you've been doing with Westwood, because I know you've been sitting with the Board of Health for a little bit, and kind of go a little bit into why you wanted to be moderator.
Okay. I've always, because of the way I was raised, done a lot of public service. Get out of high school, my father said, I was working nights, and he said, well, you're not going to sit around all day during the day, and he sent me up to a local community school, and what I did was I kind of supervised kids in the city going into a summer sports camp over at Boston University. And so I like doing public service work. In Westwood, it was always either the sports teams or teaching religious ed at St. Denis. And then I got appointed to the Council on Aging because of my background and what I do as an attorney, and I've been on the Board of Health. And I moved into Westwood in 1993 and started going to town meeting right away. And I said, boy, that's an interesting job. You know, if you're going to volunteer, you want to do something you like to do, and you're good at. And I thought, well, maybe I could be pretty good at that. So,
and I remember, whether it was in your message or not, I remember talking to you last year, and you were saying that you were just sitting at a town meeting one year, and you were watching the moderator do that, and you were like, I could do that too.
Yeah. And you know, if you don't have confidence in yourself, you're not going to say this, but I think anytime you say, gee, I think I probably could do it better than him or better than her, we'll find out.
May 6th is going to be the night to learn.
Yeah, fortunately, I think it's going to be a nice, easy one.
Yeah.
Not like last May.
No, last May was a little bit chaotic, a little bit crowded, and this year seems to be a lot more calm, which I'm kind of happy with.
Let's hope so.
I'm praying for one night.
Thank you.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about your duties as a town moderator, because obviously the big thing that you do and the most public-facing thing you do is be the town moderator at town meeting. Okay. But there's also responsibilities that you have of electing people throughout the year. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what you do and what you have done with that.
Okay, there are 3 boards that the moderator appoints people to. The Personnel Board, the Permanent Building Committee, and the Finance and Warrant Commission, or the FinCom. And that's really the most important committee. There are 15 members on that. They're appointed to 3-year terms, 5 at a time, overlapping terms. I think I reappointed 2 people and appointed 4 new people last year. And after this town meeting, the people whose terms are expiring, they'll be up. I'll talk to them, see if they want to be reappointed, and decide whether I want to reappoint them or not. The other 2, I don't think there were any new positions. The HR director of the town said I can't touch her board, so I didn't. And I knew everybody on that board. They're all good people. My only hesitance was I think there was only 1 or 2 women on that board. I'm looking for diversity. I'd like to have all these committees diverse and offering different perspectives. I'm looking for diversity of opinion, really. Different backgrounds. People can bring something that maybe somebody else can't.
Absolutely. And I think it's good also, like, the reason that I like such short terms is because it does shake things up. It keeps people moving, and not one person stays for too long and kind of inflicts their will onto it if it's not the public opinion or anything like that. So I think not only the diversity, but also these shorter terms. Like with Finance Commission, it's only 3 years per term. For Select Board, it's also 3 years per term. So I think that that's a very useful thing for people to have.
Yeah, especially on something like FinCom, the first year you're really figuring out what's going on. By the end of the 2nd year, maybe you're feeling confident in the material. By the end of the first year, that's when you really know what questions to ask. It's a big education. And so hopefully by the 3rd year, and we've got other people who've been on for 2 or 3 years, the town is well represented.
Absolutely. So again, kind of looking into like your freshman year here, but what do you plan to do differently this town meeting to kind of make it a little bit more efficient or a little bit quicker, or are people not going to notice a lot of changes? Is a lot of it going to be behind the scenes?
The warrant hasn't come out, well, the warrant hasn't been issued yet. We have a good idea what's going to be on the warrant. I'll take a look at the articles, see who the proponents are. I'll speak to them and make sure that they're ready to go as soon as the article comes up on the agenda. I'll probably speak to, I'll address town meeting ahead of time and maybe give some tips on how to conduct yourself at a town meeting. So for example, Jim Wheeler, who was a prior town moderator, issued a booklet maybe 30, 40 years ago I saw, and what he suggested was you have to address the moderator. You get up and you have to talk directly to the moderator. But what you're trying to do, what he said was you're trying to speak to the whole room through the moderator. And I'd kind of narrow it down a little bit more than that. You know, if you're advocating for a position, a lot of the people who've come to the meeting have done a lot of homework. They've watched Westcat. They've seen the FinCom meetings. They've read the warrant. They've made up their mind. Some have made up their mind for, some have made up their mind against it. What you really want to do is talk to the people who haven't made up their minds. If you're trying to convince them, and you don't have to go on long, you don't have to get up and repeat constantly what you've said already. What you want to do is come up with the point where someone's going to say, hey, you know, I never really thought about that. Or I never thought about it in that way. That's really what's going to sway somebody's vote.
And I think that was a big thing, especially last year with the Islington articles. Not that it's a hot button topic or anything, but a lot of people were getting up and making a point, I'm against this or I'm for it. And as you said, there's a lot of people in the middle who might not know. And I think that it's important to keep that argument and keep that level-headed, to try to attack the middle, because there's a lot of people that you can sway for your side, as opposed to you just saying, this is why I don't like it.
Right.
I think it's important for people, especially even presenters, to show the opinion about why this is a good or why this is bad, not necessarily just say, I don't like this, and that's kind of it. Right. And I think that a lot of people kind of miss that in the long run. So.
Right.
And I think that emphasis would be good.
And a lot of times people, what I've seen is they'll get up and make a point, and then someone will get up and argue for the other side. Well, they feel they got to get back up and make the same point again. It's like 8th graders. Yes, I did. No, I didn't. Yes, I did. No, I didn't.
The amount of times that you see the same people, just one person sits down and then they stand back up. Yeah.
Right. And what happens then is you're annoying people.
Mm-hmm.
It's late. A lot of people get up early. You know, the town meeting's getting to be 10:30 at night. They're tired. They want to get it over with. They don't want to hear you again. Mm-hmm. And so maybe they voted for you the first time. Now, because you spoke again, you've had people vote against you. And I think maybe that happened to enough voters last year that the Islington proposal, which had failed, was ultimately victorious.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to talk a little bit about the process for people who might not know how a town meeting works and might not know the process that goes on. So when people arrive at 6:30, if they want to check in or register, all the way till like the end of the meeting. If you were a new person, how do you think that you would best describe what goes on?
Well, you have to get in. You have to be a registered voter. Technically, you're not allowed in the room unless you're a registered voter. There are people there's a guest section or a visitor section. But according to the town charter, you're not allowed in unless the moderator gives you permission. So you have to register to vote sufficiently in advance of town meeting so that you're on Dottie Powers' roster. Mm-hmm. And then the town clerk, Dottie Powers, will have half a dozen or 8 or 10 people checking voters in. So you go in, you find the line for your name, you check in, and then you go into the meeting room. I'm assuming this year it's at
I believe it's the auditorium, yeah.
It's in the auditorium, okay. And grab a seat. And then around 7 o'clock, maybe a little earlier, we'll get started. The certain things that don't require a quorum will get done early. The town clerk will swear in the new elected officials. There's a couple of awards. The Cronin Award gets given out. There might be a couple of proclamations. This is all done as people are filtering in, and the town clerk's office is confirming that there's a quorum.
Because as you said, there doesn't need to be the 175 people for that stuff. That happens automatically.
That's right. Mm-hmm. That's right. It's nice that it's done at town meeting.
Yeah.
But I'll get sworn in because I'm unopposed. I'll be re-elected before I run this meeting.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Unless my wife has a write-in campaign. But and so I'll get sworn in, and the new, Mr. Hickey will be reelected because he's unopposed. We have a race for the planning board. Whoever wins, those two people get sworn in. So Dottie will swear in everybody. And I could get sworn in at the town hall, but we'll do it there. It's kind of nice.
It's a nice ceremony,
Yeah.
if everybody's there to see it and whatnot.
Right, family members come, some picture taken, but I want to get started as soon as there's a quorum. I want to get this going because as far as I know, nobody's ever complained that the town meeting ended too soon. Nobody ever complained it didn't run long enough. People want to come, they want to do the business, they want to get out of there. And then I'll call the meeting to order and I'll explain the process. Everybody will get the warrant. The warrant does three things. It calls people to a meeting. 2, it notifies everybody that there's a meeting. And 3, it's the agenda. And the agenda, I have to follow the agenda. You can't deviate from the agenda without a motion, and that's got to have a 2/3 vote. So we're going to follow that script. The first couple of ones, I believe, are house cleaning issues to clean up the budget from last year.
Mostly financial, yeah.
Right. And then the big one is the budget. And Pam Dukeman, I'll turn over the microphone to her, and she'll have a slideshow, and she does a fantastic job. She keeps it so clear. When I go to town meeting and I watch her, I know that stuff.
If there's one thing that people come out of town meeting being experts at, it's the financial stuff because
Right.
it's clean cut, the PowerPoint's great, and she does a succinct job of telling everybody.
Right. I'll forget it a week later.
Yeah.
But
That's why you get to rewatch it.
That's right. There you go.
Yeah.
And whenever an article comes up, I'll explain what the vote requirement is. So most votes are majority vote. Certain votes require a 2/3 vote.
And that brings us to another question that I wanted to ask because, as you said, some articles, I think a fair amount of them require 2/3 vote or 67%. What makes an article specifically need that versus a different type of majority vote?
It's rules. So there's 2 types of rules. There's meeting rules. We go by town meeting time. It's similar to Robert's Rules of Order. But if somebody, for example, wants to change the order of the items on the warrant, they can make a motion to do that, and in order to change a town meeting has to have a 2/3 vote to change the order.
Okay.
We'll talk about, I guess, a little bit motion for reconsideration because that was the issue from Islington last year. That requires a 2/3 vote. There are other rules in the charter that require certain things require a 2/3 vote, like amending the bylaws. And I think a Proposition 2.5 override requires a 2/3 vote at town meeting plus a majority vote at the town election. So the town has to vote a majority in favor at town election. And then if it happens, I believe, I could be wrong on this, but at town meeting, then there's a second vote, and that's another example of a 2/3 vote. So I would announce at the beginning of the discussion of the article what the voting requirement is.
Excellent. And for people who are voting, because in the past, and I believe how it's set up now still, is a oral vote. People will yell out yay or nay, in favor or against, and it's your determination to tell whether it was enough of a majority for one way or the other.
Right. That's my judgment. So I would, after the vote, I would announce it appears to be a motion in favor, a majority vote in favor, a 2/3 vote in favor. And the reason I say it appears to be because the town meeting members can challenge that. If 7 people doubt my interpretation of the vote, then we have to go to another type of counting method. And traditionally, that has always been a standing count. So the town clerk will have counters who are ready to go, and I'll ask people who are in favor of the motion to stand, and those counters will count, and we'll add them up. And then I'll ask them to sit down, and I'll ask those who are against it to stand up, and somebody will count them. Now, that provides some type of a human element, and there's always a possibility that somebody miscounted, So that's the problem with that. But town meeting members do have the opportunity to challenge the interpretation of the moderator.
Yeah, and I think that happened back in the fall of 2017. A person challenged a couple of those different articles, and certainly with the Islington articles last year, a lot of people challenged those. So a lot of people had the electronic clickers, and they had standing votes and things like that.
Right.
So to talk a little bit about electronic voting, because that's not only a warrant article this year, but I guess I'm kind of curious because we mentioned these standing votes We mentioned written votes, and this year it's being proposed as electronic votes will be added to those. And one thing that I think people might have been a little bit confused about is they saw that as the electronic voting will become the primary voting method, and that's not true.
That's not true, no, that's correct. The reason you have the ability to challenge the moderator's interpretation is because of that human element. The electronic is going to remove that. So actually there'll be 2 votes at this town meeting on electronic voting. The first vote will be a motion by someone to run this meeting but to have the availability of electronic voting if necessary. And then one of the warrant articles is an article to amend the town charter to allow for electronic voting. So people have 2 opportunities to do that. I guess from my standpoint, to keep it clean, I'll always take a voice vote first, announce what I think the vote was, and if you're going to have 7 people going to vote against it anyway, if they know what they're doing, they're going to stand up and challenge my interpretation, and then we'll go on to the next electronic vote if it passes. And then the beauty of that is we know almost instantaneously.
Yeah.
And the computer does the calculations. You don't have to worry about if you're using the right calculator and is it really 2/3 or not.
Yeah, that's why I like it so much, is because it's instant, and as you said, there's, as we used it last year, there's the little counter that goes from 30 seconds down to 0, and once 0 hits, that's it. You know the exact amount of people who voted.
Right.
And I always find it kind of funny because there are some people who will vote for an electronic vote and one article but not the other. And you can kind of see that weird number fluctuation. I always find that kind of funny.
Yeah, you don't know why people vote. And something that somebody mentioned afterwards is the possibility of fraud, and we're going to keep an eye on that. Someone leaves early, what's to say I can't say, here, Connor, you can take my clicker, and you get to vote twice.
But isn't that something to do with registration? Isn't if I sign in, I'm getting clicker number 8574, and then I have to return 8574.
That's what they're going to do. That's what Dottie's going to do. You can't get out of the room without it. If you got one going in, you can't get out without it.
And there was also a question, I believe it came from the FinCom, about anonymity, being able to kind of vote on your own, because if you have a clicker that's registered to you, somebody can go behind the scenes and look to see who voted with that specific clicker, and then they can link that name to you. But I don't even think that exists, does it?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think so. And what people have argued is they want a public declaration of your vote, and that kind of goes against the American way of life. You should be able to vote secretly. The electronic voting would obviate the need to have a secret ballot. There is a provision to have a secret ballot within town meetings. Someone could get up and say, I'd like to vote by secret ballot. That is a real pain in the neck. You have to clear the room, and then you got to re-register everybody. You got to get everybody a ballot, and you got to line them up, and that can take a long time. That could take the whole night.
That becomes 3 nights for town meeting, and
right.
That's excessive a little bit.
Right.
Absolutely.
The other problem is on a motion to reconsider. We can get into that if you want, but
yeah, absolutely.
A motion to reconsider generally is a parliamentary tactic. Once a vote is taken, it can only be reconsidered once, and it can only be reconsidered the night of the original vote by town bylaw. And so what people do is as soon as they've succeeded on the vote, they'll get up and say, motion to reconsider, and that means you have to have a 2/3 vote to reconsider it. If the motion to reconsider fails, then the initial vote is final. Technically, the only person who can move to reconsider is somebody who was on the losing side. You don't know who was on the winning side and on the losing side if they're voting by clicker. So I would ask them, were you on the losing, Connor Lynch, you stand up, you make a motion to reconsider. I would ask you, did you vote on the losing side?
Makes it a little bit easier, yeah.
Yeah, you can lie to me or you can tell me the truth.
Whatever gets me to what I want, of course,
yeah. And that's kind of a silly requirement. At some point, I think that next year, 2020, we'll be due to take a look at the town charter again, and that's probably a requirement that should be done away with. What difference does it make what side you were on? If everybody wants the vote to be final.
Yeah, absolutely. You want the finality at the end of the night, and that's part of the reason why you can't come back and bring it up to reconsider it like later on in the day, because at that night. You just want it over and done with, and I think that's a big thing.
Right, and the fear is that people show up for one article, they vote on it, and they all want to go home. You know, it might be a school issue. They might all have young kids. They got to relieve the babysitter.
That was happening last year, because immediately after the 3 Islington articles, it was the MSBA, the school building thing, and one of the planning board members had to stand up and say, you guys are all leaving, but these are important articles that are coming forward. And I think a lot of people come only for one thing and then leave, and then you get the challenge of a quorum and things like that, and that's ultimately detrimental to everything.
Right.
So for people who are watching, please stick around to the end of the meeting, because
please do.
It helps out a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we need 175 people to meet, and if we don't finish the first night, we have to go to a second night, and we need 175 people to start the second evening.
Yeah. So to talk a little bit, I don't think that there were any articles, I may be wrong about this, from the FinCom that were voted with an indefinite postponement. But in recent years, the term and the definition, I've seen people try to define it and get confused in the definition of trying to tell someone what it means. Right. So in your own words, if an article is presented and it comes with a FinCom recommendation of indefinite postponement, what does that mean?
Essentially, it means the FinCom would like to kill the article. The indefinite postponement implies that it could come back again, but it really can't. Whoever the proponent is, if it gets voted down, they have to start from scratch. They have to bring it before another town meeting. They have to get the required signatures if they're private citizens, and got to start all over again. Mike Gillette, the town manager, would say there have been articles in the past, like the alcohol licenses, where FinCom always recommended indefinite postponement, and eventually the town approved it. So it did come back, but I think that's just a euphemism. And it would be simpler to say town meeting, FinCom recommends that town meeting vote against this article. Mm-hmm. And so, but what happens is, it comes before the meeting on the motion of FinCom, whatever that is, the motion to pass or indefinite postponement. So if FinCom is recommending indefinite postponement, town meeting votes either in favor or against indefinite postponement.
Right, the actual motion will be whatever FinCom had decided upon.
Right.
And that's made very clear when you're reading the article, when you say this vote is going to be for indefinite postponement.
Right, and when they say that, they're saying vote for indefinite postponement if you're against the original article. Mm-hmm. If indefinite postponement fails, then you still have to vote on the original article. Mm-hmm. And that's really where it gets confusing. And I'll have a slide that will try to explain that, and whoever's running it, I think is Christine McCarthy, will have her put it up several times, both at the beginning and if there are any articles where they're recommending indefinite postponement. And hopefully that'll help, but it's still confusing. I still get confused.
Yeah. It's a bit of a misnomer, because you have no and you have indefinite postponement. Both mean that the article is not going to be voted upon, but there's a difference somehow. And
right.
it's always something that kind of throws me a little bit through a loop. And again, like I said, I think it was somebody on FinCom was trying to explain it a year ago, and they couldn't get the definition out. Yeah. Because someone asked, well, what does no mean? Well, what does indefinite postponement mean? So again, maybe something as we're looking at the town charter, we might want to consider changing that definition, or kind of becoming a lot more clear about what that might mean.
Right, right.
To talk a little bit about, because you were mentioning if an article gets defeated. If I am on the planning board and we propose a zoning amendment or a zoning article and it gets defeated, when's the next time I can bring an article like that back?
At the next town meeting, whenever that is. Mm-hmm. We have to have one in May every year. The last time we amended the charter, there's the possibility of one in the fall. There should be one in the fall, but the select board can decide that we don't need it. And then private citizens, 250 people, can sign a petition and can have a special town meeting. Well, any board could ask for a special town meeting if something comes up where we can't wait till November or May. Yeah,
it's actually, I believe it's like in the charter, as we always have a meeting in November, and they have to cancel the meeting. It's not that the other way around, where we could have one or we might not. It's always that we have two, and you just cancel the one in November.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Excellent. The last question I wanted to ask was, again, something that might not be specific to this upcoming May town meeting, but in the future, We've had quite a few petitioner articles over the years, and a petitioner article is when a citizen wants to come along and offer an article that they want. It's not necessarily sponsored by the planning board, not by the select board or anything like that. In the past, what I've heard is that people who want to present a petitioner article are told to go to town council in order to get like an opinion or a vetting. Why do you think that's important for a petitioner article to succeed, to go through that process?
Well, you're getting free legal advice, first off.
It helps a lot. Yeah.
It really does. Your ability to word, you may be the greatest wordsmith, but if it doesn't meet the legal requirements, or if it's a little confusing, it's not enforceable, it's not going to do you any good, and people are going to point that out at town meeting when they're arguing against it. It's always a good idea to have town council review it ahead of time, make sure it complies with the requirements of the charter, and make sure it's clear. Because any article has to be in a yes or no format, aye or nay. You can't ask an opinion. And so you've got to word it in such a way that town meeting members know what they're voting on and know what aye means and know what nay means.
And I think it's important that people recognize that a lot of these articles take years to come to town floor. There's this entire process of going through the individual committee, as the planning board has to look at the zoning and the amendments and look through all these bylaws. It has to go to FinCom. There's a huge public process that goes forward and things like that. And then a petitioner article just kind of gets made. And I think that people need to realize that when that specifically comes around, that you need that, as you said, the legal advice, because you want it to make sense. You want it to sound good. And by you putting out a petitioner article too early or incorrectly, you're kind of dooming it from the beginning.
Right, right. And then the next time when you clean it up, people are going to say, oh, I remember him. He presented that before. He's a bit of a nut. I'm going to vote against him because of what happened before, and it's really not your fault.
It's the first impressions. You want to make sure that the first time you come out guns blazing, because it's kind of tarnish the memory of it afterwards.
Right. And that's the beauty of town meeting. People can present their own warrant articles, and I'll work with them. If you have something that's presented, it's on the warrant article, I'll talk to you ahead of time. Give you an opportunity to come in, take a look at the facilities that are there. If you have a slideshow you want to put up, we can probably give you some opportunity to do that. I will make sure you speak first. I'll give you an opportunity to speak a second time if you need to rebut some of the arguments against it, and I want to make them comfortable.
Yeah. You don't want to see an article fail just on a whim,
Right. And I'm not for or against any article. I have to remain neutral. My job as a referee, make sure everybody has due process. So if you want to ask the town meeting to do something, you should have the opportunity to do that in a fair manner, and I will help you do that.
Absolutely, because that's democracy at its finest.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
So that's kind of the end of my questions, but I wanted to give you a few brief moments while we're on camera talking. If there's anything you want to say, any words of encouragement, anything going out to town meeting.
Well, a couple of things. The beauty of town meeting is it really is a pure form of democracy. You hear that a lot in the debates. And to me, what that means is town meeting is the legislative body of Westwood. Town meeting approves the budget and approves all statutes and bylaws and laws. And your vote is the same as anybody else's. We've got maybe 15,000 people in this town. All you need is 175 people. If 175 people show up for town meeting, they're going to decide those issues on the town warrant. And so your vote is probably greater than, say, someone who's voting for someone up at the state legislature or on a city council. When you come, when you speak, address the moderator, but speak to the whole room. And try to come up with something new. There's some good reason why people should vote the way you want. You'll see in the town charter it says avoid personalities. I always found that an awkward term. I guess a better way of saying that is address the issue. Don't get up and say, I'm against this article because Jim O'Sullivan is supporting it and he's a lawyer and we've got too many lawyers and so we should vote against it. Well, I am a lawyer. Maybe we do have too many lawyers, but that's not the reason this article should fail or pass. The opposite is true as well. Don't get up and say Connor Lynch is supporting this article and I think we should vote for that because of what Connor Lynch does. He's here at Westcat. He does a great job. This outfit is so beneficial to the town and we need Westcat, and so I'm going to support the article and you should support the article because Connor's he's in favor of it. All of that is true, but that's not the reason this article should pass. Don't address personal characteristics of anybody who's for or against it. Address the issue of the article.
And I think that you summed it up best earlier when you said that your argument should be to convince or dissuade people who haven't made their decision yet. Because it's a lot harder to convince somebody who already has their mind made up to think your way. Instead, you want to address the people who don't have an opinion either way. Because the more people that you can do to sway that, and as you said, a proper analysis of the article, why you should vote it, why it's a good idea, that's what's going to help you win the argument for your case.
Right, right.
Absolutely. Well, Jim, I really appreciate the introspective
Well, thank you.
coming on, and yeah,
All right, I
this
enjoyed
is a good in-depth conversation. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I again want to thank Jim O'Sullivan for joining us today. And I hope that people understand a little bit better about the town meeting process and can appreciate the time and effort that it takes for the night to happen at all. If you enjoyed this conversation, you might enjoy our past episodes, including interviews with our State Representative Paul McMurtry and State Senator Michael Rush. Westwood Media Center also offers coverage of government meetings, local events, sports games, and so much more. So give us a like on Facebook, a follow on Twitter, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to not miss a Westwood moment. But for now, my name is Connor Lynch. Thank you for tuning in, and be sure to be on the lookout for some more Town Talk.